I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be during this quarantine, surrounded by my books. If you've been following this channel for a long time, you'll know it's been a hot second since I have done a book review. If you haven't been following this channel, hello, nice to meet you, welcome. I am one half of them awkward potatoes. Miranda is currently in her own quarantine, also reading in the world of Cassandra Clare. What else are you supposed to do with so much time on your hands? You gotta tackle all those books. Life has been incredibly busy, but I am finishing up my last semester of university, and as I'm finishing it up at home doing online Zoom classes, I have had some sudden unexpected time on my hands, which means I've had a lot more time to read than I have in the past 3 years. Today we will be discussing Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. I'm so excited to talk about this. Before we get into the actual review and all the spoilers, I will say you can definitely read Chain of Gold as a standalone if you have not read any of the other Shadowhunter Chronicles by Cassandra Clare. However, I highly recommend just read them all. What are you doing right now? You're in quarantine. I feel like for me, a huge part of the appeal of this book was already knowing and understanding the world. It was so exciting to go into this book feeling like I already knew these people and I was just going on a new adventure with some friends. I'm 20. What of it? My recommendation for you, if you have not read any of Cassandra Clare's books, is to read all of them in order of publication date, including the novellas. It's a bit of a daunting task. If you are just so eager to get your hands on Chain of Gold and you don't want to read all the books, I recommend at least reading the books that event-wise take place before this one. That would be the Infernal Devices trilogy, as well as a few of the short stories. Okay, now we're going to start doing my favorite part. I miss this so much. We're gonna talk about the book. If you have not yet read Chain of Gold, you are going to want to click exit. You are going to want to leave the premises. You're going to want to pick this book up, read it, and come back later.
The spoilery section begins in 3, 2, 1.
Y'all ready for this? Just going off of what I was just saying about the novellas and the short stories, I didn't realize that the Midnight Heir in the Bane Chronicles takes place before Chain of Gold. So I thought the entire first half of the book that it took place after, so I was like, okay, something happens again between Grace and James. James becomes a total wreck, which means the second book, he's just gonna be a disaster, and I was so stressed. And then halfway through, they bring up the events that took place in the Midnight Heir. They talk about how James has met Magnus before. Because I was confused, I went back while I was reading this book and reread the Midnight Heir, and because of that, I have so many theories about what's going on, and I also had an idea of where things were going. I personally like knowing where things are headed. I don't like being thrown off guard. Like, if there's a good plot twist, it's a good plot twist. It's gonna get me. I appreciate it, but I like figuring things out for myself. That also meant that I didn't think Magnus was going to be in this book because I thought that the first time he met James was after the events of Chain of Gold. So when we saw Magnus, that was just so exciting. I love getting to see Magnus. One of the things I love so much about Cassandra Clare's different series is even though they all take place in the same world and we see a lot of the same characters, they all have a very different rhythm. I went to Chain of Gold coming straight out of a reread of the Infernal Devices, which is very poetic, so it took me a while to get into this new rhythm. I loved the flashbacks. Gave us some great character backstory. It was also great to see another lead female character who is already familiar with this world, already was badass, and because of this we could jump straight into the story without too much exposition. This was our first time going into a book, seeing the Shadowhunters really just being Shadowhunters, doing their thing without any prep against some big dark force coming, some sort of villain. It was interesting to see them just being kids, really. I mean, they still had their demon patrols, but they were all just a group of friends trying to figure things out with love and with friendship and with family. And the family stuff in this book was just so well written. Something I've talked to Miranda about a lot is how Cassandra Clare writes the best friendships. Her romantic plot lines are, but her friendships are just so perfectly written and they're so beautiful, and I think she does an amazing job with family too, and seeing Lucy and James and how close they were meant a lot, but also the relationship between Alistair and Cordelia was so truthful to sibling relationships and also just so moving. By the end of the book, you really felt for him and you wanted him to become a better person, and when he dyed his hair back to black, oh, that was a good character arc. Something that was also beautiful about this book, there was a lot more diversity in this series. I'm happy to see Cassandra Clare's world broadening a bit more, and now we have this badass woman of color lead, Cordelia Carstairs. I just don't want her heart to break. I'm so stressed. It has been so long since I have read a book where I have made audible noises while reading. I literally would be sitting in my bed at 2 in the morning, gasping out loud. I'd put the book down to applaud at times. I was laughing out loud. I had to mark one passage because it literally made me laugh so much at like 2 in the morning. Join me on this adventure, friends. Page 415. Matthew is walking Cordelia up to her doorstep, returning her from one of their battles against demons where she fell into the river and she's soaking wet. "Will your mother be angry?" Matthew said. "Have you heard of the death of 1,000 cuts?" Cordelia replied. First of all, I was like, yes, sister! Death by 1,000 Cuts by Taylor Swift! Thank you very much. So I already was like excited about this line. I always preferred the death of 1,000... It's so funny. I don't know why this line makes me laugh so much. I always preferred... I can't say it seriously. I'm a terrible actor. I always preferred the death of 1,000 cats, in which one is buried under kittens. Like, it's just so ridiculous, and I love it so much. And on that same page, he talks about his green carnation, which is a symbol of love of art, but it also celebrates loving anyone you choose, whether that is a man or a woman. So I literally was like, I'm laughing, and now I'm emotional. Cassandra Clare flips it like that. She's so good. The same way that we were very excited to see Magnus, we get to see a few other warlocks who were introduced in previous books. We do, in fact, get to see our good old friend Malcolm Fade. I see you asking Cordelia if she's a Blackthorn. I just find it so exciting because every time you start a new series, you see these old characters who you love so much, and it's just like, oh, there's my friend. There's my friend. Malcolm's not a friend, but like, there's someone I know. I'm home. I went into this book with a lot of opinions already, and I told myself those opinions would change because I hadn't actually read the book yet, and I knew that I had a lot of thoughts formed. I already knew that Matthew Fairchild had my heart and that he was a tortured soul. I knew that James Herondale had my heart. He was a Herondale. That's all you need to know. I loved Lucy because she was a writer, and I also really was shipping Lucy and Matthew from their story in Ghosts of the Shadow Market. It was one of the things I knew going into this book my mind would probably have to change, but like, I remember reading that story and being like,
oh my god, Matthew and Lucy, I want them to get married.
I don't think that's gonna be happening. This is where things get... Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare came out 7 years ago, and we had the family tree, and the family tree had characters from Chain of Gold. I had these preconceived notions going into this book with all the novellas I'd read about how things were gonna work out. And I've since learned that Cassandra Clare has said that the family tree is a found object. It would look correct to whoever had found it, but that it might not actually be true. And in some cases, I think it's a good thing. I thought Cordelia and James were safe. I thought that that was gonna be fine. Now I don't know what's gonna happen. Everyone acknowledged that Matthew had liked Lucy since they were kids, and even Lucy and James have this discussion where I was like, oh, okay. It's not like he's in love with her and she's unaware, and it's one of those frustrating situations. She knows, but she's like, he doesn't actually love me. And then I was like, what's this mean for us? At that point, I already was pretty certain that eventually Lucy and Jesse are probably going to end up together somehow. He gonna come back from the dead. Grace is gonna be involved in that. But I do think that Lucy and Jesse are likely endgame. What's stressing me out is that Matthew is so clearly in love with Cordelia. I know it actually works perfectly if you think about it. Lucy ends up with Jesse, Matthew ends up with Cordelia, and James ends up with Grace, except I have some thoughts on Grace. We will get to that, and I don't want them to be together. That's like the way where it works out for everyone. But I love Cordelia and James, and I know that one of the great things about newer young adult is that it's not always like insta-love relationships. The first person you're with is not always endgame, which is so great because that's how real life usually works. But I also just really love Cordelia and James, and I know she's loved them since they were kids, so like it could be like a Lucy Matthew situation where she thinks she loves them, but like actually she's idolizing things from their childhood. I don't think so. I think they're supposed to be together, and now they're getting married. And Grace is like messing with James with the stupid bracelet. Someone take that freaking bracelet off of him. I don't understand. Is he still wearing the bracelet? Like, he's engaged to Cordelia. I feel like she can be like, hey, listen, bud, we gotta keep this up and you need to take that bracelet off. And then he's gonna be like,
whoa, I'm in love with Cordelia.
And she's gonna be like, what? And he's like,
wait, we're married?
All works out in the end. We know that eventually James is going to be free of this whole bond he has with Grace. I don't know when that's gonna be. I really hope that's the next book. Maybe it's gonna be like a parallel to like his father, or like Clockwork Prince, where Will is like, I'm not cursed. James is gonna be like, oh my god, I don't love Grace, goodbye bracelet. So hopefully that's what happens. Then he's gonna realize he's in love with Cordelia and they're already married and it's all gonna be fine. It's gonna work out. They're gonna be fine. They're gonna be fine. I think eventually Thomas will end up with Alistair because Alistair's gonna have a great redemption arc. I mean, in the eyes of the reader, I think he's already redeemed himself pretty well, but I understand why Matthew and Thomas are angry. Totally valid after what he put them through, but I think that we're gonna see a bigger redemption arc for him, and I think they're all gonna be homies, and then I think Thomas and Alistair are gonna end up together. Regarding Cordelia and Matthew, I don't see that relationship being a romantic relationship. I think they're great homies. I just don't see them being together in a romantic way, but maybe that's because we haven't had that visual for us, whereas we've had a whole book about Cordelia being in love with James and seeing him like that, and he's clearly in love with her too, but he doesn't know because of the stupid bracelet. Grace Blackthorn. At first I was like, this poor little girl just doesn't have anyone in the world, and I don't blame her for falling in love with James. She's been through it, I understand. But there is more to this, obviously. He was in love with Cordelia as a child, and then as soon as he put this bracelet on that he got for her, he was like bound to her. When he took it off, he was like,
whoa, that's so weird. It was like it was a dream.
Listen, honey, it's the bracelet. There was a moment before that where I was like, when they were at the park, James was talking about something and Grace goes,
what do you remember?
And I just had a moment where I was like, this is Sketchtown. I do not trust this girl. The bond takes away his memories of other feelings. I don't know. There's something going on with his memories though, clearly. He doesn't remember being in love with Cordelia ever, which is really frustrating. Lucy and Grace are gonna team up to bring Jesse back. A little unlikely duo, if you will, but I don't think they're ever gonna be pals. I mean, Grace could have a redemption arc. She talks about being her mother's blade, and I think she genuinely didn't want to put the bracelet back on James, but I also don't think she regrets doing it, and that is the problem. The other thing was in the Midnight Heir, in the Bane Chronicles, when Magnus goes to the Blackthorn's manor, Grace is surprised that he's not under her spell. There's something to do with her looks, some sort of power happening that makes men fall in love with her. We also finally find out who Tessa's father is, which is very exciting information to have, except, you know, it's kind of ruining everything. It turns out Tatiana is like in league with him. It's all a stressful mess. Hi, it's a completely different day, but there were things I left out of this review that I thought were too important to leave out. And then I went into the very depths of the internet and came up with a lot of different theories and some information Cassandra Clare has dropped about Chain of Iron that I really want to discuss. I will give you fair warning before we get into all of that stuff if you don't want to be spoiled for the coming book, but in the meantime, we still have a few more things to discuss about Chain of Gold. I talked a lot about how exciting it was to have a woman of color lead, but I didn't really talk about Cordelia specifically, which surprises me because I think Cordelia might be one of my favorite lead Shadowhunters. One of the amazing things about Cassandra Clare is she writes truly flawed characters and you fall in love with them because of their flaws and they're just so human and real. But I did love how Cordelia was very level-headed. She is so kind. When she finds out that Alistair is gay and that Matthew is bisexual, she's aware that she's in a privileged position receiving this information from them. She doesn't take that lightly and she makes sure that she says what she hopes is the right thing instead of brushing it off or instead of making a big deal about any of it. She makes James apologize to her. I love that scene where she's like,
James, we're gonna go have a little chat.
And makes him apologize for abandoning her at the ball. And in spite of being hopelessly in love with James, she's not pining over him. The book isn't her being like,
James doesn't love me, he loves Grace.
She's like,
sucks that I'm in love with someone who's in love with someone else. I'm gonna go and help my family and be a badass warrior now, thank you very much.
And the friendship between Anna and Cordelia is also one of my favorite developments from this book. I love Matthew and Anna's friendship too, but I love how Anna literally sees that Cordelia's in love with James, thinks it's dreadful, and is like, I'm gonna invite her to tea. I love how much of an ensemble cast these characters are. Each character is so unique and so individual, and all of their relationships are so unique as well. And we learn about Lucy's powers in Chain of Gold. She can control ghosts? What? I'm so excited to see where this takes us. Obviously, it's gonna have something to do with bringing Jesse back. When I first filmed this video, I made the mistake of not having any notes with me, so I left things out, but I have more proof here about how terrible Grace is and the terrible things she is doing. When we first meet Grace at the ball, she asks James if he still loves her because she was afraid their distance would weaken their bond. Sketchy. Then we find out James has this vague recollection of being with Cordelia as children at her house, and then we go into this flashback and we find out it's so much more than that, but he doesn't remember it. Sketchy. Then Grace is like,
I need you to go and break into my own home and steal this bracelet for me, and then I need you to wear it.
so sketchy. I'm worried because he put the bracelet on willingly, and Belial, or whatever the fork his name is, says in the demon realm that he has to control James willingly. Now, I know the current situation is that Grace put the bracelet on him. He didn't put it on willingly this time, so maybe that'll make a difference, but I'm just very stressed because Tatiana Blackthorne thinks she's running the show, but she's in league with a prince of hell. We have bigger problems here. Tatiana is now an Iron Sister, and Belial has already said,
Yes, sis, that is how we take the Shadowhunters down.
so do we think she's going to be making more of these bracelets? She's obviously going to be making some sort of weapon to use against the Shadowhunters, but do we think it's going to be more of these like controlling devices? Okay, now we're going to get into some of the theories that have some spoilers toward Chain of Iron. Obviously the book isn't out yet, so there's no way to like spoil it, but Cassandra Clare has released some information that you might not want to know before reading Chain of Iron. If you just want to go into it and just focus on the book and the story and the words the way you're supposed to read, props to you. I'm not one of those people. I need information now. So the first thing I noticed when I went onto Cassandra Clare's Tumblr is that we're calling the bracelet a Gracelet. This is what Cassie wrote on her Tumblr. Grace has a power that affects all men. It doesn't affect James because of Belial, Belial, blah blah, demon grandfather's blood, unless he's wearing the bracelet. Her powers don't come from the bracelet. The bracelet allows her to use those powers on James. So, confirmed, Grace has powers. We already pretty much knew this, but now we have confirmation. And confirmed that the bracelet is how Grace is controlling James. Here's the interesting part. The power works on men. Cassie said that someone who is extremely sexist made the bracelet, and that's why it only works on men, because they're undermining the intellect of women. Do we know someone else who is extremely sexist who chose his male offspring instead of his female offspring to control? Belial, Lyle, Belial, demon. I do believe Grace is a sociopath, but I also believe that she does have feelings for James to an extent. I don't think she wants him to be hurt. I don't believe she loves him, but I think she's grown to care about him in the way that she can, being a sociopath. And I almost wonder if somehow we will eventually get Grace on our side against the ultimate evil, and I don't even know what that is yet. I don't even know if we've been introduced to that yet. Now I think I have said everything that I wanted to say. I'm so excited for Chain of Iron. In the meantime, Miranda and I have some plans to be hitting you guys up with some more videos in our quarantine. We will definitely not be together until things out there get sorted out, but do know we have some content headed your way. Stay safe, stay home, stay in quarantine, just like our good friends of London, Shadowhunters. Yeah, I will see you guys next time. Bye! Oh, wait, that's not what I was trying to say. I can't believe I went to school for 3 years learning how to work on camera and I can't do a book review in my own bedroom. So typical.